All right, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'm excited to welcome the wonderful Jessica Villeneuve. I hope I said your last name correctly. She's an RMT, an educator, and the owner of Samestarswellness in Calgary, Alberta. And Jessica was educated in BC and Ontario. And like me, she is an advocate for more science-based education, and she would love to see our profession evolve and adapt to realize how amazing we could be. So thank you, Jessica, for being here. Welcome, and just tell everybody a little bit about you.
Hey, thanks, Eric. So yeah, as you mentioned, I started my education in BC and actually transferred to Ontario when they lowered down from the 3,000 hours and came right back out to Alberta pretty much the day after I wrote my boards. It was always the plan to come back out to Alberta, but it was quite a shocker because I didn't really know much about massage therapy in Alberta versus a regulated province. So I bumped around from some spas out in Banff and then realized quickly that that's not what I was trained for, and I was really hoping to help people. So I relocated to Calgary a couple years later and then opened my own practice because yeah, even the clinics out here, there wasn't a place for people with disabilities or with complex conditions or pediatrics to access care. And to me, that was pretty mind-blowing because I had it ingrained in me in school. We provide care to everyone. So when there wasn't a place for me to work out of, I decided to create my own.
That's, I think, a thing that a lot of us often do. Hey, we have this mindset of what we want to do, and then we go and we can't find it, so we just create it ourselves. So good for you.
Yeah.
I guess one of the questions I have for you is why Alberta? Nothing against Alberta, but why were you like, I'm going to get educated in BC, then Ontario, and then I'm going to plant my roots in Alberta? What brought you there?
So I was in Alberta when I did my undergrad at Western, and then I came out and I was like, oh, I'm going to go snowboarding for a season, and a season quickly turned into a couple seasons. And then I realized, no, I needed to have an actual profession. So I chose massage therapy because I was a sick kid and then a child athlete who ended up fracturing quite a few vertebrae in her lumbar spine. So I had access to paramedical care as a kid, and I knew when I was thinking of going back to school, okay, that's it. Like I'll do massage therapy. But I researched about massage therapy in Canada before I chose a school. And I became aware that Alberta wasn't regulated. And I'm also a stickler for always wanting to, like, if I'm going to go back to school for something or I'm going to take a course for something, I want to take the best available education. So that's how I ended up in BC and then Ontario, because it gave me the freedom too of like, of course I want to go challenge a certification board exam. Why wouldn't I? So off I went, but then back to Alberta because of the mountains.
Perfect. Do you ski?
But believe me, there's a lot of days I'm like, man, it would have been easier if I just stayed in Ontario or BC.
Do you ski or snowboard, or is that
Snowboard.
snowboard? Yeah. Okay. Nice. Totally. That's something I didn't know. You said you fractured some vertebrae. What sport?
Yeah.
What were you competitive in as a youth athlete?
Gymnastics.
Oh, I would have guessed.
I did 4 hours a day. Yeah. So it was about when I turned 14, you have chronic pain as a gymnast, no matter what. Like you're putting so much stress on the joints, and then also contorting yourself into such odd positions like the extreme flexion and the extreme extension. So your vertebrae just don't take it very well. And yeah, it was actually my chiropractor at the time. After a few months, I kept saying like my back hurt. And finally back then they sent me for a CT scan and they were like, yeah, no, you've got some major issues going on. So I was given the choice for surgery, but back then it would have been placing rods and complete fusion. So I politely declined that. But where they are, they said they probably won't heal. So I just live with it. But it makes me a better advocate for teaching children to talk about their pain in clinic. So when they come and see us, I'm a big advocate for them actually discussing where their pain levels are at.
And that's such a wonderful thing too, because you don't hear that too often about childhood pain or pediatric, chronic pain at all. So that's great that you have that environment. Well, plus you're in Calgary. Dr. Melanie Knoll is there, so you already have somebody who's doing some world leading research on pediatric pain. So.
And it needs to be talked about more. And I think it's especially important because our job as healthcare providers, if we are going to teach or treat pediatrics, we have to have a handle on how to talk to the kids and how to be advocates for them. Because a lot of times what I've noticed is if there's a parent that has not experienced pain, but their child has a condition or an injury that is causing them pain, it's really hard for that parent to relate, and it's not their fault. But as somebody with lived experience in it, it's really easy for me to help advocate for them. So I love what I do.
Yeah, it sounds like it. No, that sounds really like it's really exciting. You know, the fact that you've created an environment for the populations that you want to serve, which is pretty much everybody, right? I think so many of us in our profession, we go to school, like we're involved in athletics, and we want to treat athletes, and we want to get involved in these like active populations. But then you realize, at least for a lot of us, I know myself included, you realize that's the population that actually probably doesn't need your services or your expertise as much as some of these populations that are really, really suffering. Now, obviously, athletes can suffer too, but usually the athletes are active. They're okay. If they get injured, they're going to recover, and you're there to kind of facilitate their training and their recovery, or help them rehab. But yeah, those other populations are the ones that probably need what we do more.
They're not heard as much. So when we're treating chronic pain, like with the migraine disease population or with MS, or we have a lot of fibro patients as well. With those more invisible diseases, they're completely kind of ignored by a lot of healthcare practitioners and by friends and families in their communities. So that's something that we really focus on as well. But yeah, no, I worked with Winter Sports Canada when I came out to Calgary at the beginning, and worked with the bobsled and skeleton, and worked with some of the flames. And I was like, man, I'll treat you, you feel better, and then you go and do it again to yourself. Where I learned, yeah, no, my passion was less self-inflicted pain and more people that were having to deal with conditions and they just didn't have access to care. So
well, that's good. That's exciting. That's exciting for you. One thing I wanted to ask you too about your clinic is, because you are in Alberta and things are different there. I mean, I don't know if it's the right word to say. Challenging, maybe it's unregulated province. How do you find the process of finding people that kind of fit your ethos, so to speak? Do you find that a challenge?
Staffing wise, therapist wise?
Staffing wise, therapist wise, yes.
Oh, it's by far hands down the most challenging part of my job as a clinic owner. Like hands down. Because of what we do, it can be challenging to market to patients because I have to it's almost like there's a 3-step approach to marketing in Alberta. So I have to probably first apologize if they've had a not great treatment before. And then there's the education piece of explaining that massage therapy is a healthcare profession, and we do have the tools and knowledge to treat complex conditions or conditions in general, because the population in Alberta, the general public, isn't aware of that compared to BC or Ontario. And then we have to, really focus on, okay, no, but like my therapists do have tons of advanced training, because it is part of our onboarding process if they go through all the Con Ed with me. So we do a pediatric portion, we do a torticollis portion, we do a migraine day, we do an SMA day, we do a CP day. So when we do bring on staff, it's a lot, but the ones that come to us and apply, they're head over heels, like, let's do this. But compared to, I'd say, like my former classmates in a regulated province, I feel like people get into this profession more so in Alberta, and maybe it is all across Canada, from what I've heard, the money, which is interesting to me, not first putting patient care first. And then the flexibility, which is also interesting to me, because that's not how this career was marketed to me or why I went into it. So it's hard. It is. I know there's tons of great therapists out there. And if anybody's listening, please apply. We're always hiring, because we need those people that put patient care first. And that's how you set yourself up for success as a massage therapist. That's how you're going to grow your patient base if you're dedicated to your patient's well-being and letting them feel heard. But yeah, it is really hard here.
It's funny that you see that a lot now, the marketing for massage therapy in terms of like going to school, and it's become, I think, such a big business. Like when I went to massage school in BC, 2003 is when I started. There was, I think at that time, there was three schools. There was WCCMT, which had a campus in New West, WCCMT in Victoria, which is like a sister campus to it.
Yep.
And that's where I went. And then there was Okanagan. So there's only three schools. I think now there might be 10. And a lot of the other schools you see like ads for earn $100,000 in your first year. Like it's all about the money, or, go to school for 18 months and earn $100,000 a year. It has nothing to do with uh, why I think a lot of us originally went into it that have been around for a while. Because I mean, I know when I went to massage school, like, and massage therapists didn't make a lot of money,
No.
like not much at all. And if you did, you had to bust your ass. Because when I first went to massage school, or when I first started practicing, we were billing $60 an hour plus GST. And now I don't know what it's like in
Yep.
Alberta, but now it's like $125 an hour. So in like
Yeah.
16, 17 years, the fee has doubled. And back then too, there wasn't a lot, not nearly the same amount of insurance coverage. So a lot of people were paying out of pocket. And so
Yeah.
now with the insurance
A lot of
plans,
our patients still pay out of pocket, like our H patients and that they don't have coverage.
yeah. So it's a funny thing. It's a different mindset. And anyway, it's whatever. Teach their own, I guess. You can make good money in
I
this job if you
wonder,
want,
like,
but it's not as
I,
flexible, I think, as people think it is.
oh God, no, that's the one thing. Like when they come out, they're like, well, I'm going on this holiday or I'm going on that holiday and I want to work only 9 to 4. And I'm like, I am the biggest advocate for people treating massage therapy as a healthcare appointment. And yeah, if you have to take an hour off work, but the thing is, like, if these are chronic cases and they need to see us more than once a month, this is not like a dentist appointment or just a checkup where they're coming once a year, right? Like the average patient can't take that much time off. So you do have to be a little bit flexible. It's just not our profession, it's lots. And like, I don't I don't know the first time I took a holiday when I came out of school. Like every time you take a holiday, you're pretty much putting at risk, like you might lose some of those patients because of convenience for them, or that's fine. And I want them to have like full access to care. But when you come out of school and they only want to work like 15 hours a week, they want to be fully booked on those times and don't want to advocate for themselves and go market themselves, but want to be contractors. It's a fun ball game.
It's hard. I probably didn't take a vacation probably for over 10 years before I actually took like a real vacation
Right?
after practice. Because the same thing, right? So I found that you were kind of stuck between certain hours that you wanted to work, or that you could work, because you had people that wanted to come morning, and people that wanted to come evening. So you had to have some flexibility in your schedule. So I would do like a morning and evening and morning and evening and kind of alternate those.
Yeah.
But then things too is for a lot of us, once you've been practiced for a while, you're booked pretty far in advance. Usually, maybe not fully booked, but you're gonna have people booking down the road, particularly these people with these persistent kind of things, and you become part of their management plan, and so they'll book long in advance. Well, if you didn't decide like 6 months to a year before when you were going to take a vacation, you'd have to be like, oh, I gotta these people, and you'd have to cancel them, and you always felt bad, and it was I don't know, it was hot. It wasn't as flexible as I thought it was going to be, for sure.
No, no, like I remember sitting down 2 years ago with my husband, like before even January 1st, like it was the end of the year before, and I was like, hey, where are we going this year? Like, where are we taking weekends? Like, when should I block them off? And he's staring at me like I'm crazy. And I was like, hey, if I open up my schedule, I'm going to be booked out like 8 months in advance. And it's not like I'm a super therapist, but it was because I sat down and listened to my patients and I'm an advocate for them. So it's interesting, like if people would come into this profession more with the mindset of I'm here to serve my community and to really help my patients and to sit down, listen to them, support them in their pain journeys or whatever they're dealing with, they will be very, very, very successful. Especially when we live in a world where healthcare is always busy. You don't get that like 45 minutes with your doctor. Sometimes other healthcare professionals may not be as like personable or like bedside manner wise, they're not going to, they might dismiss concerns. So if you sit down and you're dedicated to your patient's well-being and you're dedicated to listening to them, making them feel heard, yeah, you're going to be busy, but you've got to put that first, not the whole, I want to make $110 an hour and take weekends off.
Well, that's, I mean, that's another conversation too that, I don't know how much we want to dive into it, but really the best way to build and market a practice is to be a good human.
Mm-hmm.
Be a good person and you'll get good quality referrals. And this kind of will lead into kind of some of the other discussions hopefully we can have today. But the people ask us all the time, right? And you've probably had these conversations. I've had many of these conversations over the years. What's the best way to market your practice? What are the best things I need to learn? What modalities do I need to learn? And I always say, you don't need more modalities to be successful, to be a better therapist. You need to learn how to be a better person, to be a better listener, and how to support people on their journey. And you don't need all these fancy modalities to do that. If you take your time to listen, and you ask good questions and you validate how people feel and you make them feel heard and welcome and you provide a treatment that meets their expectations and their needs on that day, you will be full.
Yeah.
Because you are being a person-centered kind of therapist and you're delivering something that's really valuable to these people. So anyway, you don't see that enough in our profession, unfortunately. And that's one thing I like to talk about a lot is that, don't worry about all the fancy stuff, all the bright, shiny things over there. Don't look at those.
Like a cup isn't going to heal somebody, but sitting down and having an exploratory conversation, like that's what I like to use instead of the term interview, even because interview is, it's kind of putting this idea out there that I'm interviewing a patient and there's that power differential where it's like, well, if this is just an exploratory conversation, then they feel like they can open up to us. And like, we have way more time than any other healthcare provider with our patients.
It's gold.
So why aren't we using it? Like and you have to, and like as a patient myself, like I was diagnosed with migraine disease when I was 5. So my mom had to advocate a lot for me, and I'm lucky she did, but that's because she was a migraine sufferer herself, where we see tons of kids not being diagnosed because no one knows how to ask them questions or no one does. And I felt that for my entire life, like not being heard, having my issues dismissed, not being sent for imaging when I asked. And then you feel really brushed aside. So if we could harness that as therapists and say, like, this is a place where I want you to feel heard, patients will be coming back frequently, but we've got to walk in that door and gesture to that chair and say, take a seat, let's have a chat. The amount of people that have never seen that in, I don't know if it's Alberta or if it's Canada in general, they walk into the treatment room and they're half undressed. And I'm like, no, we need to have a conversation about how you're doing. And then you instantly see them kind of like the light bulb goes off in their head, like, oh my God, they're going to listen to me. And it's like, yeah, that's my job. That's my job. It's not throwing some random modality at you and telling you it's going to heal you. It's asking you how I can support you.
And I love that. And I've never heard that term before. And I will use this, but I will always give you credit if I can. Exploratory conversation rather than interview. I love that. It's so true. So true. I think that's great. So you should market a course on that.
Well, we do part of the migraine course that I teach. We have like 5 slides on it. And it's funny because even when I'm teaching and I'm promoting this, you still get the questions like, well, what about if we use Graston on their C-spine? Or what if we use reflexology? That's going to heal them. And I'm half banging my head off the wall. And I'm like, no, I'm here to teach you how to ask people how they're doing. And then you can tell them like they want to leave, go, please.
It's true. When I originally asked you to be on this episode, I was thinking, oh, well, we can talk about some of the myth busting and kind of skepticism stuff that you do, but also I'm also doing like a series on like con ed instructors. So I think we're going to kind of blend both of these into there. So I think this kind of segues nicely into why therapists are asking those kind of questions. But what about Graston on here? Or what about this technique there? And I just wanted to kind of you to reflect back onto your time as a massage student. What was your experience like in RMT education in BC and Ontario regarding things like evidence-based practice?
So, as a therapist here, and as I'm fairly well versed on the education aspect of Alberta, especially with hiring therapists, just seeing where their baseline education's at because of what we treat in my practice. Um, and I almost I'll take the stance of like I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky for at least what I had. And I know that we're still fighting for better standards in BC and Ontario, but to compare that what I had at WCCMH versus some of the private, or yeah, I guess private, the thousands of different education aspects you can have in Alberta, I was lucky. But I was lucky in the fact that I had instructors that had top-notch education as it was. Like when we were chatting before, like my pathology instructor was a pathologist. My neurology instructor was an MD. One of my manual skills instructors, systemic treatments especially, he was very, very involved in the disability community. So I was really lucky that way, where I had passionate instructors and also like a decent curriculum to follow for back then versus schools that aren't offering those special pops, the education on it, the proper education on it versus even hands-on and meeting patients with different conditions. So I'm lucky for what I received, and we didn't touch on those modalities. Like back then, cupping wasn't really a thing. Um, or if it was, I wasn't aware of it, and neither was Graston. Like I remember we had a couple of friends go do hot stone courses after, but that wasn't up my alley. So it wasn't a thing when we went to school. Like it was like you learn what you learn how to treat these conditions, which was amazing, and then you go and you write your board exams. But now it's like when I get resumes sometimes or we go to hiring fairs, it's like, oh, well, I already have my cupping and I already do Graston and I do neurofascial reset. And I'm like, you don't know how to talk to a patient. I don't care that you throw these things on people.
And that's a really encouraging. And I've talked to a few other people too about their RMT experience in school. And for the most often, people, depends on where they went to school, they have pretty good things to say. But there is some people I've talked to that where the general focus is on this kind of like structural pathoanatomical modality focus rather than these population focused. And so it sounds like your education, you seem to sound pretty good. You learned about populations, how to treat people. Whereas
Yes.
what you're finding when you're trying to hire people for your clinic in Alberta is that you're finding they're more focused on all the things they can do to somebody.
Yeah, like it's like a lot of therapists take like a cookie cutter approach. It's like, okay, well, you have this, so I'm going to treat you this way. And I'm like, whoa, no, like let's just chat with the person and see how we can accommodate them. And yeah, I don't, it's just very different to me. Like I was lucky. I'm sure there was lots that we didn't have in terms of education on chronic pain, in terms of pain in general, but we were always taught to talk to our patients, which was so beneficial. And I might have had a bit more experience and the personal approach of having lived with chronic conditions, but like I got to do my last 2 semesters for outreach in hospice. Meanwhile, they won't even let me in here to hospice to volunteer because we're not a regulated profession in Alberta.
Now, do you feel that the lack of regulation in Alberta is a problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I fought for it since the day I came out here, and I've sat on multiple of the committees and boards and that for it. But I also don't think it's a magical solution. I think there's this idea that, yeah, all of a sudden they'll say we're regulated and then everyone's going to respect our profession. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. It is, we need to be respectful healthcare providers first and gain that respect. And it would be interesting to see how it plays out here because there's rules, right? And I was trained that way. And that's very much how my brain works. The little boxes of stay within your box, stay within your scope. And it would be interesting to see how that worked out here. So we'll see. But yeah,
It,
respect wise, referral wise, yes, it would be easier for me personally then to market my company, market my therapist, have access to, say, hospices or working with Calio, like the back institute and that. But in the end, it needs to be a full-fledged effort by all the therapists to really pick up the game and act like healthcare professionals.
and that's a really good point too, because a few great points there is one is I feel that from the communications I have, the advocacy works I do, and the groups that I've associate with across Canada, I spend a lot of time, particularly in the last year, getting to know associations and schools and people in a non and unregulated provinces. So Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba in particular. And the feeling I get is that they feel that once we're regulated, things are going to be different. And I would say that it's actually, being in BC and only having worked in BC here, it's actually not that different. And in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to say this is a negative or a positive, in a lot of ways, it's restrictive. Because
Yes.
when you're regulated, there's a lot of stuff you cannot do. Like we in BC, we can't do cupping, you can't do needling, you even there's no, I should say no because there's probably a couple, but I can't think of, or I don't know of any RMTs that work in any publicly funded healthcare position. So there's no hospital jobs, there's no hospice jobs, there's no long-term care jobs for RMTs. So it's kind of, if people are expecting that all of a sudden they're going to be accepted into this public healthcare environment, that's not the case in BC. Maybe in
No.
Ontario, I've heard there's a bit more there, but I would say if you're in an unregulated province and you think that being regulated is going to change things dramatically, I would say probably not. Now, it doesn't mean
Yeah,
you should
like,
be regulated. It just means because it's good, because that way
yeah.
there's recourse and it's probably in the public's best interest to have some public oversight over what we say and do. And but it's not the be all end all magic solution to
Well,
our profession. It's not holding us back as much, I think, as some people think it is.
I think that's what I've learned over the years is they think all of a sudden it's going to flip a switch and they're going to get a gold star saying you're regulated, you're going to make more money or something, or you're going to be respected. And it's like, well, no, respect is earned. And you can be not respected in a regulated province, depending on what you're touting. Like, no MD is going to refer to you if you're sitting there telling them throwing crystals at them and essential oils is going to heal the person. It's what your beliefs are, it's what you're telling your patients, and it's the quality of care you're providing that earns you respect. Granted, it takes a little bit longer, so it's a little bit more of a public education aspect that I have to throw into our marketing, but at the same time, it's like I do know from conversations with therapists over the years, especially with teaching con ed, there is almost this very skewed idea that regulation is for the therapists. And it's like, no, regulations for the public, number one, first and foremost. And it may one day down the road benefit the therapist, but it is not for the therapist. It's to protect the public. And yeah, you guys, especially in BC, have your hands tied quite a bit, where in Ontario, I used to be able to needle. So that was a nice treat with a lot of our chronic pain patients. But what I think would be the most beneficial, and I think this is in every province, is if there was more oversight on the myths, on the misinformation, on the false promises care providers are giving the public in general, not just massage therapists, but chiropractors, some physios. Like, don't tell me 5 appointments are going to cure my migraine disease. And I think that is so incredibly harmful. But we can change that as a profession without being regulated. It just takes people putting their ego aside, being open to actually looking at evidence-based care, and calming down on the whole we're going to heal people.
Those public myths, I'm so glad you brought that up because I can speak for BC, and I'm sure it's probably the same in all the regulated provinces. Is they're there to protect the public, right? So, and their kind of motto is safe, effective, and ethical care. And the fact that there are so many of these public myths that and this BS that people put out there, right? They make these promises or they say, you put it on your website. I do this technique and this is how it works. I'm like, that's not true.
And not true at all.
There's so much untruths out there, but as we're saying off air, if people keep saying the same thing again and again and again, it becomes truth because
To
it's a belief.
the therapist at least, right? And I'm like, put yourself in the patient's shoes. Like, and I can speak to this as the patient of how many times do you think people have approached me like, have you tried this? It's going to cure your migraines. Have you tried this? It's going to, and I get it all the time, and it grinds my gears so badly because there is more risk of harm with this misinformation than actually physically hurting somebody on the table. Because after a while, especially with chronic pain patients, they stop accessing care because they've had these false promises given to them over and over and over. So they lose trust in the healthcare system, and we are part of that system. So the more that we tout like, oh, we're going to cure this, it's absolutely bananas. And I think that should be regulated a lot more than it is. That's one thing that I don't have control of here in Alberta. Like if I sent in a complaint saying somebody was claiming to cure migraine disease or reflexology, nothing, like maybe somebody would investigate it, but like there's no grounds to stand on. We have dual responsibility associations. And at the same time, it's like, well, are the people in charge of policing this, do they believe those things, right? Do they think that crystals in the feet are what are causing migraine disease? But yeah, it really, like, that kills me as a patient and as a provider of people with chronic pain, as somebody who treats a lot of them, when you come in and they're really hesitant to access care because it's straight up lying to people. It is.
100% it is. Yeah. And I always wonder with that too, is that, is somebody actually lying, or are they just are so many therapists just uninformed and are just kind of saying what they believe or want to be true? Because like you said too, we need to start acting like healthcare professionals, which means, if we look at all the competency documents, everything, you're supposed to follow evidence-based practice. You're supposed to be familiar with the current evidence for the populations that you're treating. And by not doing that, you're actually not following your kind of ethical guidelines.
It's your responsibility.
Your responsibility as a clinician to do that. Now, the problem we have too is we have schools that aren't delivering that. We have a CE industry which is not delivering that evidence base, and it actually furthers that. It perpetuates these myths that are so problematic. And I've been at this kind of myth busting stuff and calling shit out for years now. And, it is encouraging. There's more people having these types of conversations than there was, say, 7-8 years ago. And I've had a lot of people be like, oh, you spend so much time myth busting. I'm like, because it still needs to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I've been fortunate enough to teach courses all across North America and a few overseas. And I often have the same conversations with people, and it's the majority of the conversations that we have are myths that are these myths that are perpetuated by the education, by the industry, but they're also not in a regulated province. They're also not. They're often not dismissed by the stakeholders, whether that's the college or the associations. In Ontario, I think they're doing a really good job of doing some kind of public education as well as therapist education about like, oh, like this is, they're trying to change the narrative and the ideas, but it's going to take a collective from all of us in the industry to try to bring us to that level where we can start acting like healthcare professionals, all of us. Now, some people might be listening and be like, what, Eric, you're calling people out and I don't act that way. I'm not saying everybody does, but my experience, which I know is a dangerous word, my experience being an educator, having the conversations I have, the stuff that we are talking about is not known by most people.
That's, I think, the hard thing. Like you say, I feel like the people that will be listening to this podcast do want to know about evidence-based treatment. So they already probably are the people that aren't saying crystals in your feet are going to heal migraine disease, as I'm literally banging my head off the wall. But yeah, like take it from us. It's not fun standing at the front of a classroom, borderline being put on, like, crucified for saying no, like that's not correct or that's not evidence-based. And I think a lot of it comes from lack of access to proper education in terms of CEs. CEs being approved that shouldn't be approved, that are perpetuating those myths. That's kind of crazy. But then also it's ego, right? Like, you have therapists that have been practicing for 12 or 15 years, and that's what I hear the most too, is like, well, I've been doing this for 15 years. You can't tell me that XYZ doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, no, I can. Sorry. And yeah, we end up standing there almost sometimes flabbergasted because you're being attacked for trying to promote more ethical care by just saying, like, okay, why don't we all take a step back, reflect on what we're telling our patients, or reflect on how we're approaching cases. And it's instead of like, yeah, let's like do some, communication, and let's have a really nice discussion about this. It's, how dare you tell me I'm not doing it right? I'm like, that is an interesting way to take that.
A lot of it, I assume, comes from people's identities. They identify by how they treat, or they identify by their modality, or they identify by how they think, or how they view the human in front of them, or how they view the human body. And that is a problem, because it's not a personal attack, but people often will feel it's a personal attack. And the thing is when I first started, and maybe it's because I've softened my message a little bit in how I communicate, is when you were advocating for science and basically calling out stuff and say, this, this is what people might do, and you might get outcomes from that are favorable, but I can guarantee you they're not for the reasons you think they are. This is what the science is suggesting. People will often hear not what you just said, which is, I'm validating that you're doing something that's working, but this is the problem with that way of thinking, and this isn't a better explanation for it. People often hear, well, you're telling me I'm wrong.
Yes. And I wouldn't say I've softened my message over time, but I've tried to use not a lighter approach, but kind of the same approach of like, well, yes, your patient may be feeling better, but why? It could be because of X, Y, Z. And I'm all for, even if it is placebo is valid. If your patient feels better, okay, right? Like, at least it is encouraging for the patient. But it isn't because, again, like, it's the flipping crystals in the feet for me. Like, I'm sorry, but to tell me that there's some crystals in my feet that are causing my migraine attacks, it just blows my mind. But that's the thing, like, I was literally saying to two of my new staff members yesterday, we were doing a torticollis training, and we always get off topic because I'm happy to talk about education, and I'm happy to talk about evidence-based care, especially when I'm onboarding new therapists. And I was like, honestly, I think part of the problem in our profession is that we have so many different identities. Like, therapists identify, as you said, with specific types of, quote, massage therapy. We have I don't even know if holistic is the proper term to use it, but the therapists who incorporate energy work. Then we have the therapists who incorporate a spa approach. And then we have like the sports therapists, and they've all given themselves these very specific identities. And that to me is bizarre. Like, shouldn't the identity first be treating the entire population in an ethical practice and being competent in treating different conditions, instead of, I treat everyone with Reiki, or I treat everyone with ART, and I only do Graston? Like, the amount of times I hear that, I'm like, our profession is very confused as to what its identity is. And it would be great to kind of bring that all back to, we are healthcare providers, and then maybe you can have a little spin after that. But It's that's so confusing for the public. Like I wouldn't trust if I wasn't a massage therapist. Like you book in with somebody random and you might have somebody, yeah, doing Reiki on you, and then the next one might be treating you more like a chiropractor. It's very bizarre.
Well, the thing is massage therapy, it's a profession, but the
Mhm.
name, and this is the thing that I find interesting is, but the name of a profession is a verb. It's a doing. I massage. So I think it creates. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not advocating we need to change our name, but I think because of the the public probably thinks that all we do is massage because
Yes.
that's what we're called, massage therapy.
Yes.
Even though some massage therapists are like, yeah, I don't really do a lot of massage. I do more maybe joint mobs and
Mhm.
exercise and stuff. And some people might do more energy healing. Some people might just deliver a really delicious Swedish massage for an hour. There's all
Mhm.
kinds of different things that we do. But yeah, you are going to get a totally different approach across the profession. And I think because of um, our education, because of how our scope of practice is quite varied. People will often tend to, I find, jump towards something that fits their desire or their niche rather than being like, no, I'm a healthcare profession first, and then I can
Yes.
apply these other types of treatments based on this person, rather than be like, oh no, I only do energy healing. Okay, but you're a healthcare professional, so maybe
Yeah.
you can do that on somebody if they want it, but maybe should you just see what this person wants first and try and find a match in what they're looking for versus what you want to offer, rather than just like, I shouldn't say subjecting them to, but I can use that word, subjecting them to what you want to do to them.
And that's totally not what you learn in well, I don't know what I learned in school was like, okay, we chat with our patient, we figure out what's going on, and then we make a treatment plan that suits them instead of suits us. And
Mhm.
it is very odd. Like I know, like obviously, like with physios and that we do have more for sports-based physios. You do have ones that focus on chronic pain. You do have, say, pelvic floor physios, but at the end of the day, they're all healthcare providers that are providing physiotherapy. Where we see massage therapists come out of school and it's a totally different ballgame. Like some will go work in a spa where they're doing body scrubs or whatever, and then some will go work in sports clinics. And it's just it's very varied with our profession. And I feel like our profession has been bent to bend into a lot of other places, unfortunately. And we see that a lot with, I don't know if it's the same in BC, but you see that a lot in Alberta. Like you have therapists working out of a hair salon because we're this cute addition and this cute money maker to all these different kind of companies. And it's like you lose that identity of like, we are a healthcare provider. We can actually assess and figure out what's going on with the patient instead of just being squished into other jobs. It's weird. It's very weird.
It is a strange thing. And when I first started practicing in BC, it was very unusual at that time to have a large kind of multidisciplinary clinic. Most massage
Really?
therapists, yeah, well, this was 2006, I guess, when I first started practicing. Most of the clinics at the time were, if you're a massage therapist, you worked kind of with or underneath a chiro or a physio. There was a couple of very small massage only clinics, like a couple people would rent out a room. But what you see now, at least in Victoria, anywhere where I live, almost all of there's a lot of big multidisciplinary clinics here now, like a lot of them. And most of them are massage therapy dominant. I mean, massage therapy is the main profession that's
Amazing.
there. And a lot of them now are owned by massage therapists. And
See,
you
and we
didn't
have the
see that
exact
15,
opposite.
20 years ago. Yeah.
Ours is the exact opposite. Like in Alberta still, there's not very many. Like there's a couple of us that own the clinics. And other than that, we're at the whim of the chiropractors, the physiotherapists, or even what I see a lot of, and I find it's very challenging is not healthcare providers owning quote clinics because it's a money maker.
Right. So you're seeing like big corporations buying them and
Big corporations. So like, yeah, your massage addicts or your massage envies or whatever they're called. And then like I call them drive-through massage therapy. Like you're just going in for your $79 treatment. You're never gonna go back and they're burn and turns and like the therapists are just burning out. But no, like even just smaller kind of chain, they could turn into chains or even just one-off clinics of people think, yeah, I'm going to open a massage therapy clinic because it makes money. It's very odd because then if you work there, and I have worked at a couple of them before I went out on my own, and they could care less about the standards of practice, the scope of practice, the actual ethics of it. And I feel bad for the therapist, but at the end of the day, like when we're having conversations in Con Ed, it's like, well, it's your duty as the therapist to follow your scope practice and your standards. The owner of that clinic is not being policed. You are, but it's a moneymaker. We're like, hopefully one day we get to where Victoria is, because that sounds glorious.
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, I mean, I owned a clinic for a lot of years, and I've recently sold my shares in it. And we had a big clinic, and my business partner was a chiro, but we were very much the same mindset. Like he was not a rack 'em and crack 'em kind of guy. Like he was all about evidence based care, and wouldn't adjust people unless it was kind of needed or wanted. And we had a great it was a great clinic that we had built, but it was hard to when the bigger your clinic is, the more expensive it gets, and the harder it is for it
Yeah.
to make money. So it's hard to make a lot of money as a clinic owner, despite what some people think. You can, but it's not like all of a sudden just open up your doors. And no, you need a lot of people, you need a lot of volume, and you know um, require staffing, which is expensive, and blah blah blah. All that stuff
Very expensive.
is very expensive. Yeah, which I'm sure you're aware of. So yeah, it's good, I think, here. I mean, in some ways, but I think also too, what can happen is if your clinic gets too big, and there's a few of these you see, then you lose that sense of community. When a lot of people really enjoy that sense of community in the clinic, where they kind of know everybody, the reception knows who you are. So I think if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't do much different in terms of our clinic, but I did enjoy. I enjoyed it for the most part. It was nice to build a
I,
community.
I think that's it. Like people asked why, because we were predominantly mobile due to our patient base. A lot of our patients have mobility concerns or chronic conditions that um, really impacted their immune systems. But it's incredibly hard to hire for mobile. It's hard on the therapist, but that was always our goal, was to create community and to have somewhere for our patients to go and feel welcome and it be accessible. But yeah, I probably get yelled at for this one by somebody, but I think that's one thing therapists have no clue about, and it's how much it costs to run a clinic. Like 0% clue unless they've ran a clinic. Like it is flipping expensive. Like I'm sorry, but I made way more money when it was just me practicing on my own.
Right. Wow.
You do. Like you do. If you just rented a little room, like and you had a full patient base, like you can make some serious bank. But I got to the point with my migraine disease that like I couldn't treat. It's not, my brain's not reliable enough to treat. And also I got to the point where I had maxed out on my patient base. And the whole point of my company was for it to be accessible to everyone. Well, it's not when you are one person. But it's so interesting. That's the other thing I hear coming out of schools. Like they're told that they should make 75% or whatnot. And I'm like, really? With no
Wow.
patient and no extra education in any of these conditions, or actual like education in any of the conditions that we're treating. And I'm like, I don't recall being told that.
Yeah, when I first graduated, the common percentage was a 60-40,
Yeah.
was with no cap. And then that changed. There was a cap, and then it moved back, and now there's a bunch of different models you can go through. But
It's
the
so
it,
confusing.
it's yeah, if someone, as a business owner, it is very almost impossible for you to cover your costs at 25%.
Seriously, and my question is like, well, when were the last time these instructors that are saying this, when was the last time they owned a clinic or even knew what the rent to own a space cost? And then taxes, and then the support staff and all that. I'm like, you have no clue. And like, I get it totally. Like it's hard on the body. It can be really challenging, but like if I'm the one who's responsible for growing your entire patient base and it's marketing and that, like I don't know. It's to me, it's crazy because I never made that. I never asked for that. But and physios and chiros and that don't ask ever ask for that. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
A lot of the other MSK professions are 50-50 or 45-55.
I
I
know.
know a lot of people that work on those. those models. And so, yeah, our industry is interesting. We should have another podcast that we could unpack that some more about. That was
Oh my
actually
God,
one.
no, they would rather can never apply then, Eric. Like, no, we still need therapists.
I'm just, because one of the things actually, one of my other kind of themes I was looking at doing was I was wanting to do one on like talking to clinic owners about just their successes and struggles. So anyway, we'll plant that seed there. We don't have to talk bad.
Right? Just an FYI to everybody that nobody that's like, if you haven't ran a clinic before, like it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. No, it's very expensive. And until you do it, you realize, oh crap, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. So
And I love
you can
it. Like
bleed a lot of money.
you do bleed a lot of money. And like a lot of time, like even though my schedule may not be booked anymore fully with patients, like believe me, I'm still up at 6 a.m. and I'm still working till 8 p.m. Is that healthy? No.
No. No,
I'm
no,
aware.
it's not good for your physical or mental health.
What did you find the hardest, like for in terms of when you owned a clinic? Did you ever have to do any patient re-education in terms of myths and that when you had a patient step through your doors?
All the time. All the
Yeah,
time.
still,
Yeah.
eh?
All the time. Now it would depend. So we were lucky that the clinic that we had was that everybody that worked in the clinic basically had to you had to kind of subscribe to what we were doing, right? So everybody had to be kind of evidence based. There was no BS allowed. We didn't put any modalities or any um, kind of technique stuff on any of our marketing at all. So people
Yeah.
and in our clinic there was no pictures of skeletons or muscles, and the clinic treatment rooms didn't have trigger point posters. It was all like just a place, and so we wanted to remove all of that kind of traditional what you would expect an MSK treatment environment. Wanted to get rid of all that stuff. We didn't. I mean, we didn't.
Cool.
We felt that this is a place we wanted to be comfortable. We want it to be a place where people want to go, and it's like, oh, there's nice art on the wall and nice lighting, and there's not like a model of a spine here with a disc pushing out of it, and there's not like
Yeah.
a picture on the wall of like an arthritic knee. I mean, we had that stuff that we could bring out if it was relevant, but we didn't want that to be the first. We want people to feel comfortable, right? So that was just our mindset. But if people came in that were new to the clinic or they were referred from somewhere else, there was oftentimes a lot of kind of patient education that had to happen. Now, in my experience, when you like a lot of us, when you get into this, all this kind of evidence and pain science stuff, you tend to overshare and you tend to pain splain a lot, and you try to, change people's minds. And that I realized, I wish I could say I realized quickly, but it probably not as quick as I wanted to, that didn't work very well.
And
So
it takes a lot of your time.
it takes a lot of your time, and a lot of
You're
times
giving
you
away.
lose people and people take the
Yep.
wrong messaging from it. So what I started doing in the last number of years was I was just like, what do you think about that? What's that mean to you? Do you want a different
Yeah.
opinion? And then I would never ever give them the full neuro splain thing. I would just, I would ask them, well, what do you want to know about that? And then we would talk about, maybe just how like their system can become sensitized due to the stimuli that you're receiving, or what else is going on in your life that might be making it better or worse. And we just kind of have these conversations about it. If people were like, well, my fascia is really, really stuck, and I would be like, can I just tell you something about that? And usually they'd be like, sure. I'm like, I can promise you it's not that. It might feel like that, but I can promise you that it's not, because there's something in there that we need to manually tear apart. But we can do some things to make it feel better. And how do you feel about that? Oh, I don't care. I just wanted to feel better. That's just what my ass therapist told me it was. And I found that if you listen to people, you validated their experience, and if you gave them a different story if they wanted it, they jumped on board 100%. And what was great too is over time is those people would start coming in and they would start using the language that you were using, which hopefully was less nocebic.
Yes,
They
I
start
think that's
using
one of my favorite parts about treating pain, like chronic pain patients, especially like my crew and the neurological condition people, is when I can explain things to them, but it also gives them a sense of hope at the same time. Because a couple years ago, when I finally met my current neurologist, who literally is like top notch, best neurologist I've ever met, she listened to me And I fully bawled during that appointment. And I'm so desensitized and I use sarcasm to deal with my pain. Like I am 100% that patient. But she listened to me and I was crying because she listened to me. And now when I can share some of her knowledge and I talked to her about like, I'd really like to use your approach because she said, like, I'm not going to give you any promises, but I just want to let you know there still is hope. And I was like, oh, like, I don't remember the last time somebody told me there was hope. I don't think anybody ever did tell me there was hope. My condition just got worse and worse and worse, right? And I think that's you see, like, I know from reading some of your stuff with like the biopsychosocial approach, like, I have seen patients go down that road and it is so sad. It is so incredibly, it's very challenging to deal with as a therapist to dissociate yourself from it because you see it and you're like, and it just kills me though, because how many practitioners are actually leading them down that road, being like, oh, well, no, it's because you have arthritis in your spine. Oh, no, it's because you have this going on. And I'm like, you're literally giving somebody an identity to attach onto, but you're not giving them a solution. That is reasonable. But what if we help them and say, like, well, no, we have hope, right? Like, what if we make some small adjustments in the lifestyle instead? But the funny thing is, I've had therapists tell me that I'm practicing out of my scope of practice by suggesting that.
That is the craziest thing too. I've heard that before, and when in the courses I teach, people often ask, "Well, isn't that out of scope of practice?" I'm like, "What? We're helping
Yeah.
people."
Yeah.
And this is the argument I always use: is we're not counseling, we're not
Nope.
doing psychotherapy. But if we look at what our competencies are and what our scope of practice is we're supposed to follow evidence.
Yes.
Best
And
available, most relevant evidence to the people in front of you. So if that best evidence is suggesting that you have a discussion with them about lifestyle factors, or maybe you have a discussion with them about like, oh, maybe, have you considered maybe might be something that's involved. You're not counseling, you're having a conversation with somebody. And in a
like,
lot of cases, that can be the most powerful thing that you do rather than more powerful than what you do with your hands.
right? Like, what's the difference when we're talking about like therapeutic exercises and home care per se? If we're saying, well, have you considered maybe like sounds bad, but like rejoining society or getting out there a little bit as much as you can, maybe not on a basis where it's a scheduled thing, but more of a drop-in thing and doing what you can do. We're promoting them taking control of their lifestyle versus you need to stretch your traps 3 times a day and drink water to flush toxins. I'm like, sorry, what? You're saying what I'm doing is out of scope? Like, great.
Yeah, because what you've just said is completely there's no validity to what's
None.
being said. Yeah, and that goes back to this like we said earlier about we need to start acting like healthcare providers, and making
100%.
stuff up, and even things like the drinking water thing is crazy. There's not one shred of evidence, but for some reason that myth is perpetuated throughout our profession and through the public. And I think that stuff gets into the public because of the messaging that comes from professions like ours.
We literally have an entire hour, at least an hour discussion in my course for migraine on busting the myths, because unfortunately my personal condition is one of the most riddled with myths in all of the conditions that somebody can have determining on healthcare, like migraine. Like, my course is literally called migraine more than just a headache, because people, even when I am in emerge, they'll be like, how's your headache? I'm like, oh my God, it's not just a headache. But we talk about how it is, once my students leave that classroom, it is now their ethical responsibility to correct myths they hear, whether it's with their family and friends, whether it's with their fellow healthcare providers in the clinic, or even if it's with their own patients. And yes, we have to be gentle when it comes to the patients, but it's your duty to promote an evidence-based practice, I believe, as a massage therapist. So I set them up with the tools of how are they going to handle having these myths being spread throughout the clinic, or when they see them on social media. Like, social media is an absolute beast for myths. We know this.
Oh, yeah.
But if we can have more people pipe up and yeah, like correcting it with the patients as well, because they've been told something and they might attach to that belief, and that might be what's standing in their way to having more success with their condition.
I love that
So
you
if
do that. Sorry, Jessica, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just,
Oh,
I love that you do that, that you kind of challenge the people after they've taken your course to, go and, talk to people about this stuff. And I do the same thing in my chronic pain course today, or actually all my courses, I do that. I'm like, go tell somebody, right? Pursue your
mhm.
education should be pursued on expanding on the stuff that we've learned here, whether that's with me or with other people. Don't go chasing all the fancy, all the sexy technique stuff, the bright, shiny things, right? So, and go and share this information with your colleagues, go share it with your patients, and I think that is the best way forward that I see, is for us to change is through the CE industry.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that's not good in there, more stuff that's not good than is good. But because changing the schools, changing the associations, changing the colleges, the big stakeholders is impossible. Almost, I should say.
It is.
It's very difficult. But if we can provide good quality education to the people that come take our courses, then hopefully we can build a groundswell of support for people like that. And that's one reason why I wanted to get you on here, was because I know you teach some CE stuff. So just, I know you teach a course on migraines. Do you teach any other CE stuff?
Yeah, so this one's a funny one. So back in the day when we were redoing the scope of practice for the MTA and reviewing scope in Alberta in general, like just looking at things, I learned, and it was when I first came out, I was like, why are people throwing oils on people? Like, I'm so confused. Like, it was normal. Like, everyone had this bottle of mint oil, and everybody got mint oil in their massages. I'm like, what is this stuff? And I saw that there was a huge problem with people incorporating essential oils into their practices and using them to say they're healing things. So I actually created a course on the use of what I like to call active ingredients, because even like biotone and all those kind of things, like anytime they have any sort of active ingredient, but it's hilarious because it's not what people think. Like, people think they're going to get this course where I'm going to show them how to drop oil on, and we're going to rub lavender, and we're going to do it in a routine. And I get so many complaints. It's hilarious. Because really, I'm teaching them stop spreading myths, how to safely use things like peppermint oil and that, because it does have an actual effect on your nervous system, but how to stay within your scope of practice. And yeah, I honestly, I find it very entertaining teaching the course.
People don't, do people, you say you get a lot of complaints. Is there some people that are like, so thank you so much for doing this? Like, do you get positive as
Um,
well?
a lot of times I get the, oh wow, I didn't know that, because technically with most associations, even here, you're supposed to have some sort of advanced like certification on how to prove you can use it safely, but nobody does. So I get like that a lot, like, oh my God, I didn't know that, when we're looking at the legalities and the scope. But no, for the most part, people are very concerned that they did not get taught a routine. And I'm
Oh,
like, well, there should not be a routine in massage therapy. We should be providing a treatment based on what our patient presents with and discusses. So it turns into almost more of that kind of a course. But yeah, like, just to clarify, because yeah, people look it up, they will see it. It's not, I am not teaching people that they are going to get rich by diffusing essential oils in the treatment room. Very much against
yeah.
that. Um, yeah, but hopefully, like, I'll be going on like a very short mat leave here, and there's always a million courses. Like, I really want to actually sit down and finish writing one on oncology, because I feel like that's something that is there's a lot of myths on in terms of massage therapy. And then I teach internally for my clinic. I teach CP and SMA and all that kind of stuff. So it's always like, yeah, I'll get to that when I get to that.
And yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to teach. I mean, out there, and I'm always kind of tweaking and developing new content as well, because you learn something and you're like, people should know more about this. But it's a lot of work too.
We think they should, but
We think they
we've
should.
talked about it before.
Yeah,
Like, it's not because we're not throwing a gimmick at people. It's actually, it can be challenging to promote courses on conditions, which
totally.
breaks my heart.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how about your migraine course? Like, how often do you teach that?
I usually teach it about 2 times, 3 times a year. I was planning on going to Saskatchewan and teaching it last year. We're gonna have to, we'll have a hiccup in the whole, like, with baby coming, but I get a lot of like, will you put it online?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something like I need to look into eventually, is yes, hosting it online, but I'm a huge advocate for open discussions and promoting critical thinking in my courses. I don't like the whole pre-recorded. I
Yeah.
feel like if you're going to be educating somebody and you're going to be, quote, maybe changing their mind or opening them up to a different option, then you need to have a conversation about it. So maybe like recorded, but then some sort of a online Zoom call, just so that they still have the idea to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Because I would hate to provide, yeah, like here's what we're learning, but then they don't get that option.
Yeah. I just from my own experience, I launched a online recorded pain management course in 2020, and it's a lot of content, but people get lifetime access to it, which is nice. But what I do is certain times of the year, I will do a series of Zoom calls for people. I'm like, hey, if you've this is the time. Here's a Zoom link. Do you want to jump on and have a conversation? And you get variety of different attendance. Sometimes you get a lot. Sometimes you get hardly any. It really depends
Yeah,
on where people are at. And that's the issue with the self-directed stuff, the online stuff, is that people go at their own pace. So somebody might buy your course, and they may not look at it for a year.
right. I do
Yeah,
that all the time. Like
yeah,
I'm that person that is like, oh yeah, I totally have time to do this. No, I don't. So then I'm like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I think I have like 4 courses right now that I could be taking, but I'm like, I just want to make sure that if somebody's going to take the course and they have that, they get the most out of it that they can, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not just this whole burn and turn, let's make money type of thing. It's like, well, at the end of the day, I made the course for the therapist, but I made the course with the intent of providing the public with better treatments.
Yeah, and that's
That
that's the
migraine.
goal. Yeah, and that's the thing that I found too, and that was a bit of a hard thing for me to reconcile in my mind about it was, when you're a course in person, you can get instant feedback, or you can read the room, or you can tell whether people are liking it or not. With the
Yeah.
pandemic stuff and things started moving to the Zoom and this and recorded things, it opened up the door to way more opportunities. Like your market now became not just your region; it became the world,
As
which is crazy. But the downside, so plus side, money, exposure.
yes.
Downside is I have no idea if people are actually engaging with this content. So I don't know if people are they getting this? And when you go through and you can, and people listening, if you're taking on my online stuff, I can tell how much work they've done.
Oh my
Right?
God.
You can go and look and see like what they've completed, right? I mean, and so if I'm like, okay, well, you signed up for this 2 years ago, and you've done 5%. It's like, okay,
You do
well,
hate, like that would be me. I'd be like, they hate it. They hate it. That's it.
well, and
Like,
that's the thing. It's hard. Sometimes you're like, oh my god, like is it terrible? Like you watch the intro in the first video, and then oh my, and that's it. I think it's life, and I know myself. Like I've purchased online stuff before, and I'm kind of probably the same way. Like I will go through it, and then I'll leave it, and then I'll go through it again, and I'll leave it, and I'll go through it, and I'll leave it. Just the way it is when it's always available. It's almost too easy.
it's
So
that's the thing, right? And I don't want people like it's a half and half. Like I want to make sure people get everything out of it that they can because they're going to then tell this patient base that they took this extra training on a condition. So like please get the most out of it that you can. But at the same time, I know I have to let go of control eventually and be like, hey, no, Jess, like that's not your duty anymore. Like you put it out there. But I love having critical thinking conversations with students and with like my own therapist and that. Like I find that so interesting. So yeah, like maybe we'll do that. We'll do like a Zoom call. But at the same time, even then, I'm like, if I can't see all of their faces, I did a webinar for the MTA once talking about my course, and you've done them. You can't see who's responding or where the questions are coming from. And I fully had somebody get very upset with some of the information I provided. It wasn't my research; it was researched by the American Migraine Foundation. And I was like, I don't even know who this person is. Like, it's hard when you can't even have like a Zoom conversation to defend or to chat. And it's like, okay,
yeah, it is a weird thing, isn't it? I did a presentation last year for MTAM in Alberta, and it was an online thing, and I don't know, it was a lot of people. It was like 130 people that were there, but I couldn't
yeah,
see any of them because I don't know if they use Zoom. I can't remember what platform they use, but I couldn't see, maybe they did, but I couldn't see anybody. And there was questions coming in, but the questions were all read to me by the facilitator at the end. And so I
Yeah,
had,
that's what from TA.
yeah, and I mean, it's good to get that information out to so many people, but it was also a little bit weird because you're like, I don't like, I felt like I'm staring at a screen and
Yeah,
people are like reading questions over here when it's done. Yeah, it's a weird thing that we've kind of come into. And I'm,
it
like
puts
I said,
you on the hot seat. And I guess as the educator, sure, we should be prepared for that.
yeah.
But it's interesting when you can't look at somebody and say, like, oh, well, why would you think that about that research? Or
Hmm.
yeah, it was interesting to say the least. I was like, okay.
It's a different way of educating. So, but anyway, long story short, I think you should put out a recorded
Mhm.
one because I think that would be, I don't know, I think it sounds like it's great content um, that is desperately needed. Like I imagine, so you kind of hinted on this before about, the kind of some of the things people would say in your course. Have you ever taught your course outside of Alberta?
No,
No. Okay.
no,
So I
because technically
imagine,
I quote retired from Ontario. So for me
okay.
to teach in BC, I have to go unretire from Ontario.
Oh, I see. Okay. I
But
got
it got a little irritating paying for an inactive fee, but then also providing so much of my time working towards regulation in Alberta. I was like, hey, like one or the other, like we'll either give away the money or we'll give away the time. So no, BC, no. And then Saskatchewan, that, yeah, I totally can, but no, it was more of just doing it. I think it would be far more popular in a place like BC or Ontario where there is a little bit more of a focus on conditions.
right.
Um, like, yeah, I don't know though, but it would be fun. It would be definitely fun teaching it outside of like do you ever, but then again, like you have to take into consideration, I think therapists don't realize too, is like why they question why courses are so expensive. Courses are not cheap to make. Courses take a long time to make. And
Yes.
then course materials are expensive, but traveling is really expensive for courses.
Yeah. I mean, if you and you think about it too, and because I get this question often is why are courses expensive? Why are you charge what you charge? Well, first off, to put together just a 2-day workshop is hundreds of hours,
Yes.
hundreds,
Yeah.
hundreds, maybe more. I'm going to say
Yeah.
many, many hundreds of hours, and that's
Many,
just putting
many
the
hundreds.
content together. That's not reading the research and like going through dozens of papers and trying to pull out the information that is good and that you can use. Then you got to put that into some type of format and structure. And then if you want to, people like to have something to look at, so you put it in a PowerPoint or a Keynote, and you do that. And then you have to like rehearse it and practice it and make sure you know how to deliver it. And then you got to come up with different like things to do, so you're not just delivering content, which is um can be difficult, right? And
Yeah.
then yeah, and then there's the travel, and then there's and the thing is too is oftentimes, and what a lot of people don't realize is that when you are teaching courses, say, I'm going to go teach in Calgary, which I am in June. I think I'm going to be in Calgary. No, I think I'm in Calgary in June. I can't remember. I'm in Calgary in Alberta and Edmonton twice this year. But then you say, okay, well, look, I'm going to go. I'm gonna teach this course, and say I'm doing these ones with the MTAA. Well, they do all the registration. They take all that, and they take their percentage, which is great because I mean that's
Yeah.
a lot of work too for anybody listening.
It is
If you were doing a
so much
course on your own without like an assistant or without like an association, it's a ton of administrative background work, like hundreds of hours
it's
again.
and you've got that you're paying for the platform for your website and for the registration and for the fees.
Yeah, you're paying
That is
everything.
a lot of work.
Yeah. And so if you're doing it with an association, they take on all that expense. But then what happens, you're like, okay, well, they're like, okay, we've got enough people for this course to be viable. I got to pay for my airfare, book a hotel, and usually the airfare, you got to pay first. And so you're eating that cost until a couple months afterwards when you get paid. And
Yep.
then you got to go and send you're paying for your hotel, you're paying for your all your food and everything while you're there.
Food,
And you don't get
expensive.
for that for a while afterwards. So there's a big cost that you eat into, and it's okay. Yes, you can make good money teaching content. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But it's
You
not
can.
like It's not
But
as always this lucrative, like, oh my
not
God,
as
you had
easy.
50 people, you made $20,000. You're like, well, I didn't really make $20,000 in a weekend because there was all these other costs and everybody gets their piece of the pie.
That's what one of my business mentors said too. She's like, I don't think you ever take into consideration, even when you are scheduling courses, like you should be like on top of running a clinic, on top of having your own practice, you've got to be like blocking off time to advertise those courses.
Yeah.
Like that's time out of your schedule. So it's not just the 2 8-hour days that you're teaching. It ends up being between the creation of the course, which even if it is you're teaching it for the 50th time, you still taking that creation of the course, but all of that advertising, like that is tedious work,
Mhm.
answering questions, like, and I try and be so specific on my ads, like everything will say how many Con Ed credits or PD credits, the amount, how to sign up, where it is, and then you get 50 messages on Facebook, like, where is this? I don't know, read the ad.
It
You're
happens.
trying so hard not to get snippy at people, but you're like, click on the link and it takes you to everything. But no, you're also admin support, right? So big companies and that might have somebody doing that for you. But if it's just you doing it and you're trying to have a really personal touch to it, it's like you're answering those questions. And then the other thing too is, yeah, if you do have a practice, you're away from that practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, there goes that money. But it's more expensive than people think to host courses. And like room rentals and that, like that's not cheap.
Yeah, you're looking at, well, it depends where you go. You could be spending between, I don't think I've ever spent less than $1,000 on a weekend. Usually it's like two
Well,
plus three.
yep. And the thing I had to learn how to take into consideration, and I get this a lot because I absolutely love going up to Edmonton to teach, and I love the idea of traveling and teaching. But what happened was my migraine disease got to the point where instead of taking, I could just go up on a Friday and teach Saturday and Sunday, or teach Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I have to travel up at least the night before. If I'm teaching 2 days in a row for the migraine course, then I have to take a day off. And then I teach another course for one day. And I cannot drive, even though it's just a 3-hour drive, it's too risky for me to schedule just to drive back that day. So I'm staying an extra 2 to 3 days minimum. So for hotel costs and that's just because I suffer from the condition that I'm teaching on. So it's like it gets really pricey really fast. And there is a lot of fear around teaching in person now because it's one thing for me to cancel a day's worth of patients, but for me to cancel on 25 students who have traveled to come see me,
Right. Of course.
that's super scary. So the amount of times I've dragged myself in so medicated or had an attack occur mid-class and like cool, they get to see like how you can actually watch your patient go downhill, but all of a sudden I'm staying over in Edmonton an extra night and you feel really bad, like, so the stress of that, that's hard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I am still like there is a part where it's like, no, I'm lucky that I do suffer from this disease so I can teach on it and teach from an actual personal experience standpoint. But it makes it far more expensive because I have to make sure I have those accommodations in place. So
Wow. Well, that lived experience is really, really important with the stuff that you're teaching. I think that's really valuable, and I think that most of us, if we're teaching something that we're passionate or excited about, it really helps to have that lived experience. I know for the chronic pain stuff that I teach, my not my lived experience, but my family lives with some people close to me live with chronic pain, and
yes.
and so I've seen it and experienced it from observer perspective, and so that's what really got me into teaching. It was with my wife lived for years and years and years with debilitating pain, and I was like, what? This doesn't make any sense. What's going on? Like nothing. Like I don't understand. Like all these things have been done to you. Why are you not better? And I was like, I don't understand.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I bring my motivation for doing what I do came from seeing the errors and the mistakes that were made and how MSK World treated her with
Yep.
chronic pain, and yeah, I think that's a powerful thing. So
I think, yeah, it's kind of like I always say that I wish that there was more any type of healthcare professionals, especially who focus on a condition that had that condition. But at the same time, like there was no way I could go to med school with my migraine disease. Like there's no, you can't do that. There was times I missed like 3 to 4 weeks of school for massage therapy. So it does, like, these people with these conditions, unfortunately, a lot of times can't step into the role of healthcare provider, especially like in those higher roles. So when we do find people with lived experience, and I know there's quite a few educators really getting into it now in our profession. Like there's a couple with mobility, and it's like, oh, this is great, because I feel as though that is the best opportunity for students ever to hear it from a practitioner, but also somebody who either has a very close relative and has fully experienced what they're going through, or somebody with that lived experience.
One of the projects I started this last year was working with people that are course creators that want to create content and create and teach courses, and one of the big focus of that is to have obviously evidence-based content, but to make it population focused. And it's you and a majority of people that are in this program with me, they have a lived experience of something and they're teaching about it. So just like what you just said. And so I'm really excited to see, hopefully over the next few years, more and more people bringing their lived experiences with the evidence behind it, teaching more on these populations, because that's really what we should be doing. And you're going to go against the status quo. You're going to have people tell you that you're crap and that you're wrong, and that, you know, they're not going to like what you say.
Yep.
That's okay. If you don't, and this is what I always say, this took me a while to realize, but what I always say to people is, like, if you're not creating an emotional reaction in people, if you're just like monotone and boring, and you're telling people exactly what they want to hear, they're not going to learn. You need to create
they're not learning
some type of feeling in them. And sometimes that means going against the status quo, like in your evidence-based migraine courses, right? And even your aromatherapy stuff. You know, you're going against the status quo, telling people what they need to learn, and maybe not what they want to learn. And, you know, they can take it or leave it. Hopefully they will if they don't take it right away, hopefully they'll come back around and you know, realize what we're getting at down the road.
It's hard to argue with somebody with lived experience, like, and I will happily throw that back to patients, like or practitioners from an ethical standpoint, when they do try and disagree or challenge my evidence in the courses. And it's like, well, where do you get off saying that? And I'm like, where do you get off as a practitioner who has no clue about my condition? Why are you telling me what to do? If you actually have no clue about pain levels, and like pain's subjective, then what? So I find, it's far more beneficial to live with somebody from a lived experience standpoint, even when we're doing in clinic, like in-house practice training, because I personally had treated a lot of CP and a lot of SMA, but when I went to make the training for my staff, I had the light bulb turn on of like, how dare you, Jess? Because like, if you're getting really cranky with these people talking about migraine disease, or what like normal people call it migraines, and how you should be living, why on earth are you speaking to mobility conditions? I don't have a mobility condition. I have a neurological condition. So we actually hired on an amazing community outreach coordinator and accessibility consultant, and she's lived with SMA obviously her whole life. And we did a lot of research and had input from our SMA patients so that they could speak to how they wanted to be spoken to with a disability, the language that they wanted to be used, and the way they wanted to be treated. And that was, out of all the things I did last year, like one of the best things that I did as a practice owner was to take a step aside and be like, we need to bring in more lived experience input into even just our clinic training.
That's amazing.
It's not my job.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It sounds like you're doing great stuff there, and your people that work at Samestarswellness are lucky to have you. We should probably wrap this up. I don't know how long people want to listen.
Go treat.
Yeah, you're gonna go treat. Yeah, you gotta go work. I gotta edit this now. So thanks, Jessica, for being here. If anybody listening wants to check her out, Samestarswellness. That's the same name you use on your Instagram and reels as well. So check those out. And thanks for being here, Jessica. And maybe I'll get a chance to meet you in person in Calgary.
Yeah, that's so weird. We've actually never met in person. I always forget that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for listening to Purvis Versus. Please subscribe so you can be notified of all future episodes. Purvis Versus is available on most podcast directories. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment and share on all your social media platforms. If you'd like to connect with me, I can be reached on my website, ericpurvis.com, or send me a DM through either Facebook and Instagram at ericpurvisrmt.